Hello, Warfighters. War is hell. Welcome to the video where I'm doing a self-reflection on the second Falklands War series. So, this was the first time I'd ever done a series like this before at this kind of scale and this level of detail. Some of you know that I have another channel on YouTube. It's larger than this one, and I started, it was actually very interesting. So, I was going through a little bit ago, and I saw that you could just automatically add mid-roll ads to every single video that you had on your channel, and I'm like, oh, sweet, that's going to make it so much easier. And I'm working on the other channel, by the way. And apparently, YouTube's mid-roll ads, when you try and add them automatically, are terrible. So I had to go through and edit every single video that I have on my other channel and try and remove 5 ads being within a 1-minute time frame. It was absolutely stupid. But it was really interesting to see, on that channel, that's really where I started playing Arma. And it started off by me just playing the single-player campaign. And then I did a couple horrible attempts at machinima on there with Arma 3. And then I started this series that somewhat is the predecessor to this one. And basically what it was is it was the 2035 timeline that's your default Arma 3. And it was a war between NATO and CSAT. And it was going to be super long. It was called Resolute Alliance. And every single mission that I would play, it wasn't like this one where I have everything planned out before I go in, but it was just, okay, so if I win this mission, then I advance on to the next one. If I fail this mission, then it diverts somewhere else. And so it's basically a story that evolves as I play it. Now, this series, the second Falklands War, I had to do a lot more research. I had to stick to a lot more detail and complexity just to try and make sure that I stay grounded in facts and present something that's somewhat interesting for you guys. And so it's kind of cool how it's evolved since then, but still, this series is not like anything that I'd ever done before. And so I was actually very nervous to do this. And so when I started the series and decided what my first one was going to be, I wanted to make sure that I made a conflict that wouldn't garner too much attention, since this is a learning experience for me in this first series. And the survey that I asked you guys to take, which I'll talk about towards the end of this, was actually a very important step in me trying to get a feel on how this is going to go. Are people going to like something like this or not? And I did learn a lot from doing this series. So from a mission maker perspective, there's a lot of scripts that I found and a lot of additional things I utilized in the editor. Some of the changes you'll see in the next series, some of the stuff that I learned, I didn't want to start implementing right in the middle of the series. One thing as far as cinematics go to kind of make it cooler, I didn't want to start doing with only 3 episodes left. And so once we start off the next series, hopefully you guys will kind of notice that I put a little more weight on some of the cinematics. One thing I learned, though, that I will definitely take with me into future series is I learned a lot about the passion of the two sides of this conflict, both Argentina and the UK. And I understood full well from a lot of the research that I did prior to this series that Argentine and British citizens felt very strongly about the islands. I never recognized how passionate both sides really were until I posted my first Arma video on the war. If you go back and you take a look at where I invade the airfield at Port Stanley and you look at the comment section, you'll see some very interesting stuff in there and some very strong debates. That did have me somewhat nervous because I'm like, all right, I already know who's going to win this at the end of it based off of the research that I've done and just my own personal feelings. And I thought that the way people would like or dislike a video would be based completely on, where they live and stuff like that. And that was not the case, which is actually really cool. So, but, that passion that exists, I'm going to have to make sure that I recognize that for any conflict that I do in the future. You guys chimed in on a lot of interesting stuff throughout this entire series in the comment section. You guys taught me a lot about what a potential conflict like this might be like, and I appreciate that. And as I prepare for other series like this, as I mentioned, I try to do a lot of reading, as you can imagine, a lot of research, but there's no way that I can be an expert on all aspects of a potential war or know about all the military capacities of all the different nations that you're going to see in future series like this. So thanks to everybody, especially the service members from each nation, for providing your input on stuff. That was actually really cool to learn that type of stuff and something for me to obviously take into consideration for future series. So now that I've kind of talked to you about some of the things that I've learned, I kind of wanted to talk about some of the difficulties that I had when doing this series. What was the first and probably the most important difficulty I had wasn't anything to do with the videos necessarily, but right before the end of this series, my wife gave birth to our third child, my second daughter. So I've got a son who's 4, a daughter who's 2, and now a newborn daughter. So before the end of the series and right after, I had to do some real daddy type stuff, which didn't let me put in as much time to this as I would have liked to, or my other channel for that matter. Like, I actually have really neglected the other channel. But, you know, a lot of the stuff that I do actually takes a lot of time. The missions that I make, with the detail that I do and, you know, trying to play through it, all that type of stuff. And so that was one of the reasons why I don't post nearly as much as I know some of you guys would, was because, you know, I've got some other stuff outside of here. But I'm always going to try to put as much time into this stuff as I can, because I do enjoy it. About the videos, though, I do see this as a challenge, and this was echoed in a lot of the input that you guys gave in the survey, and it was about the map that I ended up using. And I think that the map really illustrates some of the challenges that I have when using Arma as the medium to discuss the Falklands conflict or any other one in the future. I mean, I will give Arma a lot of credit. I mean, it's not just a game, it's a platform for people to be able to make mods for and be able to create their own stories. And I love that about Arma. But even though there are tons of mods that are available, it is difficult to near impossible in a lot of instances to find a map or a mod that accurately represents what you're trying to do, or or the story that you're trying to tell. And so I got tons of comments on this, and trust me, I knew full well prior to starting this series that the Falkland Islands is a barren set of islands with like no trees in sight. You could just do a quick Google image search for Falkland Islands and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about if you don't know the Falkland Islands. However, I wasn't able to find a map that accurately reflected how the Falkland Islands would look. There was one map that was modeled after the Falkland Islands, but it hadn't been updated for some time, so the skies in the map were black, and I also wasn't happy with actually how it was created, because there was some massive changes in altitude in some very small areas, and so sometimes you would see almost vertical cliff faces right in the middle of like a flat area. It just wasn't created well, and not one that I would want to use for this. So I had to resort to a map that I felt could somewhat reflect it, and a lot of maps have tons of trees and a lot of foliage, but finding one that had some barren areas was very difficult. And the map that I ended up using, Old School Malden, was honestly the map that had the least amount of trees that I could find that was large enough really for me to tell stories at multiple places, so that way it's not like, oh yeah, no, I've seen that place before. You know, I'm kind of playing over the same area. In addition to that, though, by choosing that map and really any other map, I'm also challenged with the amount of settlements and towns that you guys saw. I knew that there was going to be one place where I was going to need to do an urban warfare kind of scenario, and that was in episode 2, in the battle to take Port Stanley. But by choosing this map, I had to balance out, okay, so there's places where there are not that many trees, but it does have more villages and towns and all that type of stuff than the Falkland Islands has. So there were other maps too that might have been just about as barren as Malden, but they either had Middle Eastern or Mediterranean architecture, which didn't match what you would see in the Falkland Islands either. And so trying to balance out everything, that's the decision that I made and why I made that decision to go with this map. Again, I know it's not perfect, but it was honestly the best I could do with all the searching, you know, that I had done to try and find a somewhat decent map. The last challenge that I kind of want to talk about that I experienced was that I wanted to keep this series exciting, which meant sometimes not focusing so much on reality. Like, for example, in many of the defensive missions, so we'll take the one that takes place, or we'll talk about the one that took place right after the UK invades the islands. All right, I know that as I'm sitting there in a checkpoint with wave after wave of British infantry coming at me, that mission could have been ended very quickly by a round of artillery, a 500-pound bomb, or a naval strike, but I decided to forego all that in favor of seeing if I could hold out against a superior force. And there were other instances like this as well where I had to kind of break away from reality, like aircraft, for example. All of the aircraft really are, you know, you're going to find a lot of ones that are either Russian or American. And as I'm going through and playing that, I mean, seeing a giant red star would probably detract from that too. So I also had to try and find a balance. It was like, okay, Argentina doesn't have any aircraft that I ever found in Arma 3. And so I'm like, okay, what's the closest thing that I could find that would somewhat resemble it? All right, let's go with it. Yeah, I probably broke away in a substantial amount in a lot of areas, but, you know, I'm not going to be able to do all of this perfectly. Especially in something like this, you know, where Argentina is not a large military force that a lot of people are going to be willing to make mods for. I was actually very surprised I even found one that included Argentina in it. But I guess I'll talk about one more challenge that I had when I was doing this series, and it was something that none of you guys saw, because every single video that I created for this series, once I posted it, it was automatically flagged by YouTube as not being ad-friendly. What made that worse is that I wasn't told about it. Like, there was no notification that I received or anything like that, and so I had to initiate a manual review of every video that I posted on my channel. And since, you know, it has been remedied since then, that's not a problem, but it really made this series frustrating to do at times, since YouTube support is far from the greatest. I don't really care so much about the money, but just knowing, like, I wasn't generating any revenue when I knew I should be, and the fact that for some reason my stuff was being listed as not ad-friendly was very, very frustrating. But looking at the positives, though, this little experiment I had went far better than I had expected. I didn't know how this was going to do it. As I mentioned earlier, you know, I have another channel, and I started posting Arma content on there. But since that channel is mostly for sports video games, my community there wasn't too fond of the Arma content. And that actually what spawned War is Hell. That way I would have a place that was primarily this stuff that I, you know, enjoyed being able to play Arma, but if I didn't have an audience that wanted to see that, I wasn't going to post it. So I really did think that I would get the same type of negative feedback over here, you know, that people just didn't like Arma. But fortunately, that was not the case at all, and for the most part, the feedback has been really positive from all of you, which I definitely appreciate, and definitely inspires me to continue going with series like this. So speaking of your guys' feedback, I'll go ahead and transition to talk about the survey a little bit, and I did get more responses than I had anticipated. I appreciate that. I'm in a leadership program for where I work. I work IT at a university, and one of the things they talk about is that feedback of any kind is a gift, and that it should be seen as such, whether positive or negative. And I feel that in this case, the feedback was phenomenal. I do consider that a gift. So again, thank you for the feedback that you guys gave me. This will not be the first time that I'll ask for you guys to do a survey. I'll probably do it after each series, just at some random points and stuff like that too. So the first question that I asked was just, how much did you enjoy the series? And this is awesome. I averaged a 9, which is phenomenal. 9 out of 10 is much higher than I expected to be able to get out of that. Some of the things that I appreciated seeing too when I looked at some of those responses is what you liked about the series was people did enjoy seeing different sides of the conflict. You know, me playing as both the UK and Argentina. I actually created the missions too to evenly show each side. Like, there was 9 missions where I played as the UK and 9 missions that I played as Argentina. Somebody said that this is the only accurate Arma series, which is cool that people would say that. I mean, there's a lot of milsims that are out there that try and stick with realism and everything, but you know, having something like this that kind of talks about potentially what could happen was pretty cool. Another thing that stood out for me is people like the way that I told the story, such as like the introduction when I talked about why Argentina went to war, and I put real political stuff into the scenario as well to talk about it. So that was cool to see that was a big focus on it, because I did not think that the introduction, the conclusion, or the intermission was going to be one of those things that kind of stood out the most. But you guys liked it, and obviously I'm going to keep going on with that, because I think it does kind of introduce things a little bit more rather than me just jumping in and bullets firing. It kind of gives some understanding as to why things are happening. As for the responses, though, as what people did not like about the series, some people thought I had a bias, which I don't feel that I did, but I can understand why people might think that. For example, I constantly refer to the islands as the Falklands Islands and not the Malvinas. My information came from a book written by the British. A lot of the articles that I read were, BBC or written in English, so there was that. And also, I'm an American. That actually came up a number of times. I'm an American, so obviously I'm going to think the British would win a war like this. But there were some other things that I thought were great takeaways too. For example, I made it known that Russia had, donated weapons to Argentina. However, I really didn't show those weapons that much. And so it's like, okay, if Argentina is going to get this boost, I need to show them more in this series. So that was great feedback. Thank you for that. How easy I beat the enemy. You guys would actually be surprised how many times I did die. But from a mission creator standpoint, it's like, oh man, I just spent 4 hours going through this and I die in the first, or like 4 hours creating this mission or more in a lot of cases. And I die within the first 5 minutes. That's not going to make a great video. So trust me, it's actually a lot harder than it is. There are times where I cut out and transition to save time, but also because I've died a number of times. Like when I was playing as Argentina Special Forces, I cannot tell you how many times I died trying to take that place. Like, it was so frustrating. And when I finally beat it, I was like super excited, but you guys don't see that in the videos. However, it is something that I am going to definitely look into improving for the future ones. I got a piece of feedback saying that implementing some things that weren't realistic for the sake of entertainment. Some people didn't like that. And I can understand that too. But the one that kind of like made me the happiest when I asked what you guys liked the least about the series, I got a number of them that were saying waiting for another episode. So that made me happy. As far as the next few two questions that I got, which was about your favorite moments in episodes, I honestly couldn't have asked for better responses since there wasn't one moment or episode that really stood out. I got such a good spread in responses of the different missions that I can't say anything else other than I couldn't be happier that so many of you liked a number of different missions. Like, that's very uplifting for me, that it's not like, okay, I like this series because of just one episode. Like, everybody, kind of talked about different ones. It was so good to see that. So again, thank you so much, you guys, for all of your feedback on this. I really appreciate it. It's going to do a lot for me to improve the future series that I'm going to be doing like this, and of course the channel as a whole. Both the positive feedback and you guys pointing out places where I can improve helps a ton. I'm going to try to improve the brand and the videos based off of what you guys have said. I want to get better at making this type of content for you, and so your guys' input is invaluable. There's a few ways that you guys can help me out as well. One of the things is by donating to my Patreon, if possible. Even something as little as $5 or $1 a month actually helps out far more than you guys could imagine, because there's lots of things that I want to do, but I don't have the money to be able to do it. And so if you guys can donate, that helps out. Also, sharing the videos is a great way to help spread the word about what we're doing on this channel. And so hopefully you guys can make it a habit that if you see a video that you guys like, that you obviously hit the like button, but you also hit the share button as well. So that way, it gets passed around to a number of people. Like, that's the type of stuff that I'm hoping that you guys can do to be able to help me out and really let other people know about the community that we are trying to make. We're still very new, of course, and we've got a lot ahead of us. I really do believe that. So thanks for watching my own personal reflection. The next video that you're going to see in the Alternate Histories series is going to be me introducing the next series that we'll be doing. So I'm excited for this. I really am. Like, I'm already a few missions in on what I've created, and I love it. And I hope you guys do. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if this is your first video. Follow me on Facebook, Twitter, all that stuff. But war is hell. You don't have to worry, because war fighters, I've got your 6.